The divorce hearing lasted less than 20 minutes, but it destroyed a lifetime of pride in a single moment. The successful businessman standing before the court believed he had already lost everything that morning, yet nothing prepared him for the final shock waiting behind the judge's bench. When Judge Nathan Carter looked into his eyes before signing the papers, memories buried for more than 30 years returned like a storm. The little brother he had abandoned without looking back had become the man with the authority to legally end his marriage. Some wounds never disappear, no matter how much money, success, or time tries to bury them. Sometimes life quietly waits until the perfect moment to place us face to face with the people we once left behind. Before this unforgettable story continues, please take a moment to like this video, leave a comment, share it with someone who believes in forgiveness, and subscribe to Love Without Limits if you believe kindness and second chances can truly change lives. Your support helps us continue sharing powerful stories that touch the heart. The story began decades earlier in a quiet neighborhood outside Nashville, Tennessee, where two brothers grew up inside a small white house that struggled to keep out the cold each winter. The older brother, Michael Carter, had always been ambitious. Even as a teenager, he dreamed of escaping poverty and building a life filled with success, expensive homes, and respect. His younger brother, Nathan, admired him completely, following him everywhere and believing that nothing could ever separate them. After their parents died within months of each other following a tragic highway accident, the brothers faced an impossible future. Michael had just turned 21, while Nathan was only 11. Suddenly, adulthood arrived far too early. At first, Michael sincerely tried to care for his younger brother. He worked 2 jobs, skipped meals, and sacrificed sleep. Yet the burden slowly crushed his dreams. Bills piled up, opportunities disappeared, and frustration replaced love. Every difficult decision seemed to remind him that responsibility had stolen his future. When an investor offered Michael a chance to move to Chicago and help launch a promising construction company, he convinced himself that Nathan would be better off living with distant relatives. Without explaining his true feelings, Michael left. He promised to return after becoming successful, but weeks became months, months became years, and eventually decades passed without another visit. Nathan never truly believed his brother had stopped loving him. Every birthday, every Christmas, every graduation, he quietly hoped Michael would appear. Instead, he learned to survive disappointment by turning pain into determination. Raised by elderly relatives with very little money, Nathan studied harder than anyone else in school. His teachers noticed that behind his quiet smile lived extraordinary discipline. He graduated at the top of his class, earned scholarships, attended law school, and eventually became one of Tennessee's youngest respected judges. He never allowed bitterness to define his life, although the absence of his brother remained an invisible scar. Meanwhile, Michael's life appeared to become everything he had imagined. His construction company expanded across several states. Luxury cars filled his driveway. His beautiful mansion overlooked a private lake. He married Rebecca, believing that wealth guaranteed happiness. Yet success slowly changed him. Business became more important than family. Long hours became excuses. Pride replaced gratitude. The marriage that once looked perfect from the outside slowly collapsed behind closed doors. Rebecca felt increasingly invisible while Michael buried himself in endless contracts and financial victories. By the time she filed for divorce, neither recognized the people they had once promised to love forever. On the morning of the final hearing, Michael entered the courthouse expecting another ordinary legal process handled by another unfamiliar judge. He barely glanced toward the bench until he heard the clerk announce the judge's full name, Nathan Carter. The surname immediately caught his attention, but when the judge lifted his eyes, time itself seemed to stop. The little boy Michael had left behind now wore a black judicial robe, carrying dignity earned through years of sacrifice rather than inherited privilege. Nathan recognized his brother instantly as well, yet his expression remained calm, respectful, and completely professional. Throughout the hearing, Nathan never allowed personal history to influence a single legal decision. Every document was reviewed carefully. Every procedure followed precisely. Michael watched in silence, overwhelmed not by the divorce, but by the realization of everything he had missed. He imagined birthdays forgotten, school achievements unseen, hospital visits unattended, graduations ignored, and countless lonely nights his younger brother had survived without him. Sitting in that courtroom, Michael understood that the greatest loss of his life had never been financial. It had been family. When the proceedings officially ended, Nathan quietly signed the final order dissolving the marriage. His signature carried no anger, revenge, or satisfaction. It simply fulfilled the responsibility entrusted to him by the law. As everyone prepared to leave, Michael remained frozen in his seat. For the first time in decades, success offered him no protection from regret. The expensive suit, polished shoes, and luxury watch suddenly felt meaningless compared to the weight pressing against his heart. Outside the courthouse, rain began falling softly across the city streets. Michael stood alone beneath the courthouse steps, watching people hurry past with umbrellas. Then Nathan walked outside carrying only a worn leather briefcase. For several silent moments, neither brother moved. Years of pain stood quietly between them. Finally, Michael admitted through trembling words that abandoning Nathan had been the greatest mistake of his entire life. He confessed that every promotion, every new home, and every financial achievement had failed to erase the emptiness created the day he walked away. Nathan listened patiently. Life had taught him that forgiveness was never about pretending the pain never happened. It was about refusing to let yesterday continue destroying tomorrow. He explained that becoming a judge required him to understand justice, but becoming a man required him to understand mercy. The scars of childhood remained real, yet carrying resentment forever would only create another prison. He had built his life by choosing purpose over bitterness. Over the following months, the brothers slowly rebuilt a relationship that many believed could never be repaired. There were awkward conversations, painful memories, and countless moments of silence. Healing did not happen overnight. Michael began visiting Nathan's family regularly, meeting nieces and nephews he never knew existed. Instead of discussing business, they shared ordinary dinners, old photographs, and memories of the parents they both missed. For the first time in decades, Michael discovered that genuine wealth had never been measured by bank accounts, but by the people waiting around the dinner table. Michael also transformed his priorities. He created scholarship programs for children who had lost parents, quietly supporting families facing hardships similar to those he and Nathan once endured. He no longer chased recognition because he finally understood that legacy grows through compassion, not possessions. Nathan watched these changes with cautious hope, recognizing that true repentance reveals itself through consistent actions rather than emotional promises. If this story has touched your heart, please like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, and subscribe to Love Without Limits for more unforgettable stories about forgiveness, family, and second chances. Before we reach the end, tell us in the comments could you forgive someone who abandoned you if they truly changed? As the sun finally broke through the clouds one spring afternoon, the two brothers stood together beside their parents' graves, no longer separated by pride or silence. They understood that the years they had lost could never be recovered, but the years ahead still belonged to them. Sometimes life does not give us the chance to rewrite the beginning of our story, but it graciously offers us the opportunity to write a better ending. In the end, the judge who ended his brother's marriage also helped restore the family that had been broken for decades, proving that forgiveness is not the absence of pain, but the courage to choose love despite it. The weeks that followed became the most unfamiliar season of Michael Carter's life. For the first time in decades, his calendar was no longer filled with endless business meetings, luxury dinners, or ambitious expansion plans. Instead, it slowly filled with Sunday family meals, quiet phone calls with Nathan, and long drives to places that reminded them of the childhood they had almost forgotten. Every reunion carried moments of joy mixed with the sadness of realizing how much life had passed while they lived as strangers. Nathan never rushed the healing process. Years on the bench had taught him that trust could not be demanded. It had to be earned one decision at a time. Michael understood that as well. He stopped trying to erase the past with expensive gifts or dramatic apologies. Instead, he chose consistency. Every promise he made, he kept. Every invitation from Nathan's family, he accepted. Slowly, the distance that had once seemed impossible to cross became smaller with every shared memory. One autumn afternoon, Nathan invited Michael to attend his daughter Grace's high school graduation. Sitting among hundreds of proud families, Michael felt an emotion he could hardly describe. He watched Grace proudly receive her diploma while Nathan and his wife applauded with tears in their eyes. Michael realized that this was the kind of wealth he had spent his entire life searching for without knowing it. It could never be bought, negotiated, or inherited. It was built through years of showing up, sacrificing, and loving people consistently. After the ceremony, Grace surprised everyone by asking Michael to join the family photograph. As the camera flashed, Michael struggled to hold back tears. For decades he had believed he no longer deserved a place in any family picture. Yet there he stood beside the brother he had abandoned and the family he never imagined would welcome him with open hearts. Inspired by the second chance he had been given, Michael quietly expanded the scholarship foundation he had started months earlier. The organization grew into a nationwide program supporting children who had lost parents or been abandoned by close relatives. Rather than placing his own name on every building, he chose to dedicate the foundation to his late mother and father, believing they would have wanted their family tragedy to become someone else's hope. Stories of the foundation began spreading across the country. Hundreds of young people received opportunities they otherwise would never have had. Some became teachers. Others became nurses, engineers, firefighters, and attorneys. Whenever reporters asked Michael why he devoted so much of his fortune to strangers, he simply smiled and explained that everyone deserves someone who believes in them before the world does. Nathan quietly watched these changes with pride. He understood better than anyone that people could genuinely change when they were willing to confront the truth about themselves. His brother had once measured success by profit margins and luxury homes. Now he measured success by lives improved, families restored, and children encouraged. Several years later, fate created one final unforgettable moment. Michael was diagnosed with a serious heart condition requiring immediate surgery. The successful businessman who had once believed himself unstoppable suddenly found himself lying in a hospital bed, uncertain about tomorrow. As he opened his eyes after the operation, the first face he saw was Nathan sitting patiently beside him. There were no dramatic speeches. Nathan simply reached over and gently held his older brother's hand, just as Michael had once done when Nathan was a frightened little boy after their parents' funeral many years before. In that quiet hospital room, the circle of their lives finally felt complete. The brother who had once been left behind had become the one who refused to leave. Michael recovered successfully, but the experience permanently changed him. He retired from daily business operations and devoted the remainder of his life to mentoring young entrepreneurs, encouraging them never to sacrifice family for ambition. He openly admitted that success achieved at the cost of love eventually becomes the loneliest kind of failure. Every Memorial Day, the two brothers visited their parents' graves together. They brought fresh flowers, cleaned the headstones, and spent hours remembering both the painful and beautiful chapters of their lives. Those visits reminded them that while the past could never be rewritten, the future could always be lived differently. If this story reminded you that forgiveness is stronger than resentment, please like this video, share it with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to Love Without Limits for more unforgettable stories that celebrate compassion, family, and second chances. Before you leave, tell us in the comments what do you think is harder, asking for forgiveness or choosing to forgive? As the years passed, people often remembered Judge Nathan Carter as a wise and compassionate man who balanced justice with mercy. Others remembered Michael Carter as a successful businessman who reinvented his life through humility and generosity. But those who knew them personally remembered something far greater. They remembered two brothers whose broken story became living proof that love can return even after decades of silence, and that sometimes the greatest verdict ever delivered is not spoken inside a courtroom. It is written quietly inside a forgiving heart. Several years passed, and the story of Michael and Nathan Carter quietly became an inspiration far beyond their own family. Neither brother sought attention, yet people who witnessed their journey often shared it with others. Ministers mentioned it in Sunday sermons, teachers used it as an example of forgiveness, and families struggling through painful disagreements found hope in knowing that even decades of separation did not have to become permanent. Michael never forgot how close he had come to finishing his life completely alone. Whenever he looked across the dining table during family gatherings, he silently thanked God for giving him another opportunity. Thanksgiving dinners that had once echoed through an empty mansion were now filled with laughter, children running through the house, and stories that stretched late into the evening. Every smile reminded him that relationships were life's greatest investment. Nathan continued serving as a respected judge, earning a reputation for treating every person with dignity regardless of their background. While he always followed the law faithfully, he never forgot what it felt like to be a frightened child who simply wished someone would believe in him. That memory shaped every decision he made. Young attorneys admired his wisdom, and many sought his guidance not only about the law but also about integrity, compassion, and humility. One spring morning, Michael received an unexpected letter. It came from a young man named Samuel, one of the first students to receive a scholarship from the Carter Family Foundation. Samuel explained that he had grown up in foster care after losing both parents and had nearly abandoned his dream of becoming a physician because he could not afford college. The scholarship had changed everything. He had recently graduated from medical school and was now working in a children's hospital, helping families during the most difficult moments of their lives. As Michael finished reading the letter, tears rolled down his face. Years earlier, he had believed that the biggest buildings and the largest business contracts would become his greatest legacy. Instead, a simple handwritten letter from someone he had never met brought him more joy than any financial success ever had. Nathan smiled as he read the same letter and quietly reminded his brother that kindness always travels farther than we can see. The brothers decided to visit the hospital where Samuel worked. They watched from a distance as the young doctor comforted anxious parents whose child was preparing for surgery. Samuel spoke with calm confidence and genuine compassion. In that moment, Michael realized that the scholarship had not simply educated one student. It had created hope for thousands of families who would one day receive Samuel's care. A single act of generosity had multiplied into countless acts of healing. That realization inspired the brothers to expand their foundation even further. They partnered with churches, community organizations, and local schools across the United States to identify children facing overwhelming hardship. Scholarships became mentorship programs, counseling services, and emergency assistance for families struggling after unexpected tragedies. The mission was simple. No child should ever feel abandoned simply because life had become unfair. As they traveled together to different communities, Michael often shared his own mistakes without hiding the painful truth. He openly admitted that ambition had once blinded him to what mattered most. Instead of pretending he had always made the right choices, he encouraged others to repair broken relationships before time stole the opportunity forever. Audiences listened carefully because his words came from experience rather than perfection. Nathan usually ended those gatherings with a quiet reminder that forgiveness never changes the past, but it can completely transform the future. People frequently approached the brothers afterward, saying they planned to call an estranged parent, visit a forgotten sibling, or apologize to someone they had not spoken to in years. Those moments convinced both men that their painful history now served a purpose much greater than themselves. One evening, after returning from a charity event, the brothers drove back to the small neighborhood where they had spent their childhood. The old white house was gone, replaced by a modern home built on the same piece of land. They stood together across the street as the sun slowly disappeared behind the trees. Neither wished the past had been different anymore. Instead, they felt grateful that the hardest chapters of their lives had led them to appreciate every peaceful moment they now shared. Michael quietly reflected that if he had never walked away, he might never have understood the true value of coming home. Nathan looked at his older brother with a smile that carried decades of healing and replied that sometimes the longest journeys lead us exactly where we were always meant to be. Not back to a place, but back to the people who never stopped being family. Their story became proof that while life often delivers painful consequences for our choices, it also leaves room for redemption when humility, patience, and love replace pride. The judge who once ended his brother's marriage had ultimately helped restore something far more precious, a family that refused to let yesterday have the final word.